Hey, Dr. John Finn here. Welcome to the Habit Mechanic podcast. Right now, you can get my new best-selling book, Train Your Brain for the AI Revolution, at tougherminds.co.uk. The digital book, audiobook, and physical book are all available at a special price that you won't find anywhere else. Hello, Habit Mechanics. Dr. John Finn here. I hope you are well and having a great week so far, especially if you've been working through the 4-day challenge with me. And today we're on day 4 and we're going to get into the 4th step. I do apologize again that we are having building works, not inside the Habit Mechanic office, but just, or the Tougher Minds office rather, but around. So if any of that noise comes through, that's what it is. I don't think it will. Also shows you it's not an AI generated podcast. We are doing this real. You don't tend to get those noise effects in AI generated podcasts, which in my experience you do actually sometimes get in professional recording studios. You'll get a noise coming from somewhere where you have to, having paid all that money to go into the professional studio in the first place. Yeah, in my experience, you do sometimes have to stop because there's noise seeping into the very expensive sound-proofed room. But at least in those situations, you have an editor with you to tell you. But anyway, I think we've gone beyond having massively funded broadcast quality content. I think COVID kind of killed that, and for the better, I think, because it just means creating insights for people is just easier, and you can do it faster, and therefore do more of it. And that's why I like it. But anyway, it's not an AI. This is me, Dr. John Finn. Okay, so we have gone through the first 4 steps of the AI Edge success cycle, and hopefully there has not only been some light bulb moments going off in your brain, but you're starting to see some progress just in the last 3 days. Even if you're just getting a little bit more recharge, or you've been doing a bit more high charge or a bit less medium charge or a higher quality medium charge, or just you're just understanding those brain states more. That's a really good result. And what we want to do today, reminder, this is a YouTube video as well as being a podcast. So I'm going to share my screen, just bring up that 4-step AI Edge success cycle. So where we're moving today is automation. So we know that we don't do what we always know we should necessarily do. And that classic example is more people than ever before agree it's a good idea to walk 10,000 steps a day, but they don't. More people than ever agree it's a good idea to eat 5 portions of fruit and vegetables, but they don't. And we can see that in big sets of compelling data, the most compelling being that the National Health Service, essentially the biggest company in Europe, spends most of its budget every year treating diseases that emerge because people don't walk 10,000 steps a day and they don't eat 5 portions of fruit and vegetables. They don't do those basic things that most people agree is a good idea. So if we're going to help ourselves to build what I would call complex new behaviors, complex new habits, we need to recognize that knowing isn't enough. And we need to give ourselves the best chance of actually habitualizing, in this case, doing something like the Willpower Story every day. So doing that very deliberate, intelligent, self-watching and intelligent planning exercise. And that's why we've created the 9 action factor framework. So this is the willpowers. So yesterday I did a bit of a recap on the lighthouse brain. And again, if you're just dropping into this on day 4 and thinking, wait a minute, where's the other episodes here? Just go backwards in the feed and you'll see the last 3 days. If you haven't gone through it systematically, starting at day 1 to day 2 to day 3 to day 4, go back to day 1. Maybe even thinking, oh, I forgot what he's talking about here. So go back to day 1 and do it again. That's why we've created it like we have done. So you can just go back and keep cycling through this process. So the lighthouse brain that I introduced or recapped on yesterday, I talked about willpower's assistants. So you've already met the task director and the day designer. And today we're working with the routine engineer. So what's the difference between a routine and a habit? It's really that routines are strings, sort of interconnected. It's like a linked chain, if you like, of habits. That's a good way of putting it. I've never said that out loud before. That's good. I like that. So it's like a routine is like a linked chain of habits where you plug in, lots of helpful habits together, or what we call super habits. You also have linked chains of destructive habits, so they're destructive routines. But essentially, the routine engineer is going to help us to think about and plan ahead to get the behavioral science, the factors that actually drive what we think and do every day on our side. And so if you've got your copy of Train Your Brain for the AI Revolution with you, and we go to, we're going to go down to step 4. So this is in step 4. But actually, before we go there, we're going to take a little kind of detour because the visual I want to share on the screen is a 9-action factor model. And that actually is a bit further up. So when we've looked over the years at behavioral science in terms of what's coming out of academia, and I say looked at, I mean, I've taught this stuff for over 25 years now, and you literally find yourself often, and less so recently, but more at the beginning of my career, when you're kind of starting out, you'll often deliver the same session again and again and again. So there were periods where I was delivering the same session. I think it was the same sort of 1-hour session, something like 14 or 15 times in a 2-day window, doing that consistently. That's when you really get to know your stuff. But it's also where you get critical about the accepted way of thinking and the accepted way of doing things. I remember that very clearly, just for example, with teaching smart or smarter goal setting, and thinking there must be a better way to do this, surely, come on. So when you look at the behavioral science literature, essentially it's dominated by quite a small group of academics. Nothing against academics, by the way. That is my background. I still think of myself partially as an academic. But the science is kind of dominated by a small group of academics throughout the world. Some groups in the US, some groups in the UK, some groups in other parts of the world. And often you have one group that really champions just one element, actually, of the things that drive our behavior. And they'd be very anti acknowledging that anything else is important in behavior change, or they'll be very reluctant to, give credit to other theoretical models, because that's kind of how academia works. It can be very tribal. People can be very defensive. So
when I started my career, there wasn't a playbook like the 9 action factor model, didn't exist. And just to give you some examples of what I'm talking about. So if you look at one of the founding fathers of behavioral science, B.F. Skinner, he would be seen probably as one of the most prominent behavioral scientists with his kind of pigeon research, way back in, or probably the 50s, if not before that, where he showed the importance of reward and penalty systems, and in particular the importance of variable reward systems in driving behavior. But that isn't the only thing that drives behavior. It's an important driver, but it's not the only thing. If you look at Carol Dweck's work on what is now called mindset, it didn't used to be called mindset. Dweck's been working on that since the 60s. And it's a very important insight that you need to believe that you can change, because actually you can, as Carol Dweck rightly talked about, where before we could actually see inside human brains that brains actually do change, and they're like plasticine, they're not fixed. So Dweck's kind of popularized framework is, the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. Well, that's important. It's important to believe you can build a new habit. But again, it doesn't explain everything about behavior change. And we've got the nudge guys, who I forget their name. They're associated to Chicago Booth University. There's a group of them. I know that because they've done a talk at the City of London, Chicago Booth University campus. And their books are plastered all over the place. But nudge theory is great. This idea that we need to be reminded and triggered, but it doesn't explain everything about how we get good at doing new things, practicing new things so we can automate them. And this is why we created the 9 action factor model, because we wanted to give people, well, first of all, we wanted to give ourselves a systematic understanding of what actually drives behavior. How can we create a belt and braces approach to make sure we have the very best chance of helping people to actually get better at the things that they want to get better at, like being more focused, being less stressed, sleeping better, being a better leader, being a better team member, being a better parent, eating more healthily, being more confident, all that great stuff, performing under pressure. So we researched and we tried and we tested, and we researched and we tried and we tested. And that's how the 9 action factor model emerged. The 9 action factor model actually used to be, it was a 7 factor model, probably about 10 years ago now. Again, we refined. And what actually sits behind the 9 action factor model is about 250 different tactics that you can use, that we use in our consultancy work. But the simplest application of this, when we're coaching people, we're working with them one-to-one, is we use the habit building plan. So by answering the questions in the habit building plan, and if you got the book in front of you there, this is in step 4, and it's in so step 4 has 3 chapters: chapter 23, chapter 24, chapter 25. And the habit building plan is I unpack the 9 factors in chapter 23. I do another assessment in chapter 24, the how you hinders change, and then we create the habit building plan in chapter 25. So in chapter 25, so that you don't have to know all of the 9 factors inside out, we have the habit building plan where we ask you, there are 10 reflective statements, and across those statements, where implicitly getting you to kind of tackle each of the 9 factors. And the 9 factors are all interconnected, so there's lots of crossover. But if you go through these 10 questions, it's a real belt and braces approach to giving yourself the best chance of getting those factors working for you instead of against you, because those factors are always on. If you're really good at being stressed, and I know just even saying that sounds odd, what really good, because we think about good things as being positive, right? Or being helpful, but we can be good at really unhelpful things, right? So getting stressed, we can be really good at being a poor sleeper. We can be really good, can be excellent at being, we can be an excellent procrastinator, right? That means that, in fact, well, it means you've got a ton of neurons in your brain for those behaviors. And I'll do one more. You can be a world champion poor leader, or a world champion not very good leader, but which means you've got a ton of neurons in your brain for bad leadership behaviors or unhelpful leadership behaviors. So in order to get good at those things, the 9 factors were on your side, and they're still on your side now. So what we have to do is we have to target the new thing we want to get good at. And in this case, we're going to target creating a willpower story. And my example in the question 1 of the habit building plan is create my willpower story in my workbook at 8:30 a.m. at my desk in my 10-minute planning meeting with myself. And then the next thing we do is we say, right, what's the competing behavior? But I'll come on to that in a second. So you've got to pick that new thing that you want to build. And by practicing creating my willpower story in my workbook at 8:30 a.m. at my desk in my 10-minute planning meeting with myself, just by practicing that, I'm starting to build neural networks for it. And, the way our brain works is just like, because it's all interconnected, it's just like how physical skills work. Psychological skills work in the same way as physical skills. Even if you just think of writing with your left hand, if you're not left-handed, you won't be very good at it because you've never practiced it, or you very rarely practiced it. If you add up the amount of time you've practiced writing with your right hand, if you're right-handed, it will be tens of thousands of hours. And that's why it's so fluid, because there's so many neurons in your brain for it. People talk about muscle memory, which doesn't actually exist if you look at dynamic systems theory. A theory about learning that was driven by a group of scientists that I actually studied under. Very fortunately, back then at Manchester Met, and those guys went around the world and spread that theory. We're not going to get into that; it's quite complex, but it basically shows muscle memory doesn't exist. But it's a nice term, and we kind of get what it means. But whatever we're good at, we have a lot of neurobiological connections for that thing in our brain. Whatever we're not good at, we don't have a lot of neurobiological connections for, so we need to build up new ones. And the questions in the habit building plan help you to do that. I'm not going to go through them all right now. You can do that yourself. But essentially what we have to do is we have to get the 9 factors working for us. And what we're starting to get into now as we close the loop, as we go from step 1, measuring brain states, to step 2 of essentially creating our FAM story, our future ambitious, meaningful story, which is a long-term strategic plan for ourselves, but that starts today. It starts in that next 30-day period. And the willpower story, which is a daily strategic plan. And then the habit building plan, which is the practical way of getting the 9 action factors working for you. What we're starting to do is get in a cycle of personal research. You are doing this research project on yourself to work out, where are my brain states right now? What do I need to do to help me to improve my brain states? And this is what we mean by coaching yourself. You are working on yourself. I cut my teeth in professional sport. That's my background. And the technology company I work for, called Prozone, which now doesn't exist. It's owned by a much bigger company. I'm not sure who owns it anymore, actually. It's owned by a massive US hedge fund. But anyway, they were pioneers in making it easier for soccer coaches, or as we say in the UK, football coaches, and rugby coaches as well, and some other sports. They're pioneers in helping the coaches analyze and the players analyze what was going on in the field. So how far did players run? So, before we had GPS, we were using trigonometry to work out how far players had run. How many passes did a player make? How many long passes? How many short passes? How many headers? How many tackles? How many of those things were successful? And they were making it easier for the coaches to take what they were seeing, because that's data, and to amplify that and to see, are there any patterns emerging? It's much harder to do that for our own behaviors, for the things that we think and do every day. But what we're trying to do fundamentally with this process is we're trying to get above ourselves, and we're trying to look at ourselves in a much more constructive and detailed way, so that we can see, what am I doing every day, and how does that fit in with the kind of stuff that I want to be achieving this month, or in the next 12 months, or in the next year, or the next 10 years. And by connecting those two things together using the AI success cycle, we can, one small super habit at a time, we can start improving the way that we think and what we do, so it's more helpful in helping us do the things in our lives that we want to do, achieve the things in our lives that we want to achieve. So that's what we're doing. And that same methodology, same simple 4-step process that you've gone through, if you're listening to what I'm saying right now, because you've worked through the 4 days, probably you've done this in under an hour, maybe slightly longer. That's the same process that you use to coach others. And when we talk about becoming a certified habit mechanic coach, we're not talking about necessarily setting up your own coaching business, or you can absolutely do that, and people are doing that and having great success. But fundamentally, we're talking about learning how to coach yourself. And it's simple, but also it's complex. And that's why we have this structured 3-month training program that we've created, that's got in it everything that I've learned about coaching myself and others over the last 25 years now, so that people can access that same learning as well. And excitingly, they can also understand how to deploy those skills to optimize and capitalize these new neural network AI technologies that are emerging, that can help us to essentially improve our brain state scores. That's what they fundamentally can do, because they can help us to do less medium charge, do less busy work, help us to do more high impact, high charge work, do it faster, but also get more recharge done. That's why we're so excited about AI. That's why I wrote Train Your Brain for the AI Revolution. So that's what you're doing. So this cycle isn't just designed to be gone around once, the AI Edge success cycle. It's designed as a foundational framework. And we have a leadership model that we also use that builds on this, and we have a team model, but that's not for today. This is the foundation. So that's all I want to say. I hope that's got you thinking. I hope that's been really helpful. I'd encourage you to revisit this. We are periodically at the moment giving 75% funded training grants to people that want to become certified coaches. So if that's of interest to you, you'll probably see some messages about it. If you're not seeing the messages, just reach out and ask us, and we'll let you know if there's any places available, and see if it's a good fit for you. I think that brain state intelligence and especially those who can help others to do it, is going to become one of the most sought after skills on the planet. And currently, there's only a handful of people who know how to do it. So, this just learning how to manage your own brain states and helping others to do that is a massive opportunity. So, if you like this, you think it's interesting, the next step is to put it into practice for yourself. And then I just really encourage you to do the formal training so that you actually understand how to go beyond just knowing this 4-step cycle and just kind of doing the free level, as I'd call it, and really get into the in-depth expert level, so you can see all of the playbooks we've created, all of the hacks. I don't like that word particularly, but what I mean is there are shortcuts to doing very robust behavior change if you know how. And I share all of that with you in the Certified Habit Mechanic Coach training program. So thank you for listening. Thanks for taking the time. What should starting to be connecting now actually also is that, although it's not completely obvious, so I will say it out loud, every habit we build fundamentally should be focused on 3 core things. One is helping us to get better quality recharge. 2 is helping us to optimize our medium charge brain states. And 3 is helping us to optimize our high charge brain states. Or I could say that again. 1 is optimize recharge. 2 is optimize medium charge. 3 is optimize high charge. That's, everything that you're doing in terms of habit building really is focused on those 3 areas. So that's why brain states are so powerful. They're so important. And we need to develop a language to help us to understand how to optimize how we use them. And people need teachers to help them to do that. So they need people like you to see this system at a high level in practice for yourself, and then share it with others. But that's also why I say you're only ever one brain state habit away, because the brain state habits they're everything really. Once you understand that, it's a breakthrough moment. So thanks for listening. Revisit the 4 days if that's helpful. Remember, this is an evergreen cycle. And remember, you're only ever one brain state habit away.
Thanks for listening to the Habit Mechanic podcast. If you liked it, please subscribe and tell someone else about one of the ideas or insights that you found most interesting.